Yay for the kids. It never ends, though, for folks like Philip Martell and all of our Indiana County school leaders. They continue to work on the next year, and a part of that, of course, is budgeting, which is always a headache, I know. And there are factors that go into that budgeting that make it really an uncertain process. So let's visit with Mr. Martell this morning. Our visit presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. You can visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
It's good to have you with us here today. You wrote an op-ed about charter school funding in Pennsylvania. I'm getting a little bit of wind or something into your phone there. Charter school funding in Pennsylvania, I don't know what it's like in other states. I don't know if any state has come up with the perfect formula for it, but Pennsylvania obviously does not have the perfect formula going right now. Efforts underway in Harrisburg to fix that, but according to your op-ed, those efforts really don't have much of a chance of making a difference, do they?
They really don't. It's almost like the movie Groundhog Day, and we keep doing the same thing year after year. And it's almost like, we in Pennsylvania with the general funding formula. We now are rewarding poor performing or failing schools even more, while other schools are struggling to find resources, including obviously to pay the cyber charter costs. But it's just not unrealistic. It's very good political rhetoric what they're doing, but in all seriousness, I mean, no one could explain where they come up with the $8,000 figure. And you think about the logic behind it. When some schools like us are paying $13,000 for regular ed and $20-some thousand for a special ed, they're certainly not going to agree to drop the $8,000 on a flat line. It would, it makes no sense. I think it's good political banter, but it's just never going to happen. And it's just sad because we have so many other challenges.
We had State Representative Struzzi in here last week. He was talking about that very same thing. The $8,000 figure you referred to was in the version passed by the House and sent on to the Senate. The Senate has a whole different approach to the whole thing, but in both chambers, there's just no way to see it getting across the finish line, is there?
No, and, it's unfortunate because, the Senate Republicans are going to implement a school choice version, which I, strongly support. But this governor's backtracked because of the pressure from the teachers' unions across the state, and now said he's not going to implement school choice, which he ran on in his platform, which is sad. So, again, if that doesn't happen, then nothing gets done. And as I said in my op-ed, it gets put on the shelf, and everybody forgets until next year. And, they have all these superintendents running around having town halls, and I commend them and all that. It's just like we have so many other pressing problems, but this has just become political rhetoric, and so they can say that they checked the box and they did something.
94% of Pennsylvania school districts signed on to a letter of some form or another objecting to the way that Pennsylvania funds its charter schools, demanding that the legislature do something. The lobby that is in control, really, of a lot of these lawmakers in Harrisburg is certainly going to be resistant to all of that. So that all being the case, what is the fix? How do we get to something that is really going to benefit school students in Pennsylvania?
I think that we have a relationship with a number of charter cyber schools. They know that change has to happen, but I really think what you need to do is, instead of all this bantering back and forth, I would suggest that that they put some type of task force together to have both sides sit down. Okay, say what is fair, what does that look like? Because obviously you're not going to implement this. Let's say this would pass overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. So what does that gradual tuition look like instead of giving everybody sticker shock? I understand our public school budgets are tight, and that $8,000 goes a long way. But as I said, they're not going to just drop. You have schools like Wilkinsburg and other city schools that are paying $40,000 special ed. They're not going to allow it to go to $8,000. It's just not. It's not realistic. So something has to be done with strategic planning, with a multi-year plan to implement a new tuition. But I'm not so sure that they want to do that.
Well, that is the big problem. That, as you said in your op-ed, a lot of it is simply posturing, and posturing is not going to get the job done.
There's no question. And I just joked with you before, our governor's worried about National Guard troops in California instead of worrying what's going on here because he's posturing for his run for the White House. Like, focus on what's going on in our state, the challenges we have. Start with this education funding formula. until something happens, I mean, you're going to have this inequity built in. You're going to have these major tax increases for all these school districts, and homeowners are going to bear the brunt of this whole thing, and it has to change on both sides.
River Valley and all of the school districts in Indiana County dealing with the uncertainty of knowing what is coming from Harrisburg, what will be demanded of them as well. The bill is coming in already for charter school funding, and so school districts are scrambling to find ways to address that. You get to the point where school districts, have an educational path set forward. It might involve hiring 4 or 5 teachers in the course of a typical summer, getting ready for the new school year, and all of a sudden those teaching positions have to disappear because the charter school bill comes in, and we can't afford the program anymore. Classrooms get crowded more because there aren't enough teachers that can be fit in under a school district's budget. Do I phrase that correctly, or do I frame that correctly? That's one of the chief problems that public school districts like River Valley faces.
There's no question about it. We looked at this year. We had 7 retirees and a few other people leave. I think we replaced 2 positions, and that was only strictly out of need. Could have I replaced, to your point, 3 or 4 more others to benefit students even more? No question about it. But because of these budgetary constraints and this lack of funding to get things done, and as I've said before, we don't have a problem. Our charter school, we have less than 50 kids because we build a good product. Our families feel safe in our buildings. But that's not everybody else. Somebody may be struggling to have the resources to do what we did. We just maximized our resources more efficiently, more of a business approach, quite honestly, from my background, and that's why we were able to survive. But now, I can't pull any more rabbits out of that. And that's the thing. Something has to change with the funding formula in general, because if we're not going to get increases from the state, even if the minimum ones, then all the districts are going to struggle, mainly rural school districts.
Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Pennsylvania are 2 entirely different, they're entirely different states, aren't they? Because they look at education differently in the other half of the state. They are constructed differently, particularly around the Philadelphia area. And so what they want to do in the eastern half of the state really has a tremendous and terrible impact on what happens here in the western half of the state. How do we, as you said, maybe a committee would be able to come up with something that would make everybody happy, but it seems as if that divide is insurmountable at the moment.
It really is, because if you look at what a lot of districts have run into this year, simply taught, is the lack and the decrease in assessed valuation of property within their school district. Where in the eastern part, in Bucks County, Delaware, Chester, they don't have, or they're actually assessing each year instead of falling behind on a reassessment. That's one issue. But the decrease in valuation of property has put school districts in hole because we're reliant on that local tax. So if property values go down, the amount of taxes you collect go down. That's why we need some type of mixed hybrid taxation for schools in Pennsylvania, like other states, whether it be a mixed use of sales, property, something else, because it's not working anymore just relying on strictly personal property taxes.
Well, you say timing is the thing. Timing is the key thing here. And the timing as it works out for our school districts is that here comes June 30th. Your budgets must be finalized before then. Pennsylvania Constitution demands that the state budget be finalized by then, but somehow they get around that. You don't have that option. We don't have that option. And they're not going to be done. I would expect late August, September at the earliest, which puts more cost on us, because if we have to do a bridge loan to make payroll and things during the summer, like a lot of districts, the taxpayers in my district are going to have to pay the interest on that. And again, unfair to your point, they need to meet the timeline just like we meet the timeline. Get in a room, hash it out, and pass your budget. But we don't even have the option to revise our budget. So the other thing. So if something comes in different and they cut more funding, we basically have a hole in our budget like everybody else. It's a terrible process and way to do things. Yeah, and the ways in which a school district can raise revenue are so limited, so severely limited in Pennsylvania that once you set that final number really can't adjust at all. It can't. And if you have that hole and you have expenses exceed revenue, simply comes from the district's fund balance. But how long could districts hang on when their fund balances are depleted? That's the next wave. I will predict you now that will be next year, where you'll have districts who do not have fund balances,
that cannot, because of the way Act 1 is, you can only raise so much revenue. Their expenses are going to far outweigh it. That means they're going to have to furlough and cut services to students, and at the end of the day, the students suffer.
Does it lead to more school district mergers?
It needs to, quite honestly, because it will make equality a little bit better. But I think, there's a sense that some are just going to sit on their hands and let this thing blow up to rebuild it, which is not a way to do this, instead of being proactive about it. But my feeling is, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I think they're just going to let the system come down, and that's going to be their way to rebuild it. Well, that's not how we should be approaching this.
Is there the possibility, our final question with Philip Martell this morning, Superintendent, River Valley School District, is there a possibility that Pennsylvania eventually switches to a county school district approach, where every county has all of its schools under one organization?
I think that could possibly happen in some of your smaller counties. Obviously, and it comes back to the turf, right? I mean, you look at the challenge we had merging the Blairsville-Salzburg School District, just basically over turf and mascots and all the other fun stuff. If people can get over that hurdle, I think it's a possibility, but I think it's something that has to be looked at. And maybe you explore it with a couple of smaller counties with only a handful of districts, because, I know there are other counties near us. There are 5 or 6 districts that are having conversations themselves, being proactive, saying, we're going to probably have to merge, so why don't we get ahead of this thing? And I applaud them for that. But I do think that that's something that they have to look at. I don't understand how they're going to let this continue to blow up.
He is Philip Martell, Superintendent of River Valley School District. We will get that op-ed that he wrote posted at WCCSradio.com. Give everybody a chance to read it. Thanks so much for joining us here this morning.
Thank you, Todd. Take care.
There's Philip Martell with us here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. It is a thorny issue, to say the least. Good morning to you, and thanks so much for making us a part of your day. We appreciate that so very much.